All right, guys, we're reading the story Mike on Strike, and we've already set up a page right here. It's called Text Connector. And what we mean by Text Connector is, can you connect it to your life, in some way? Like, that character reminds me of my uncle or my brother or I've got a friend like that. Or, hey, that happened last week at my friend's house. Connect it. Or, you know what? I read a story like this. It's real similar to this story. Connect your reading to something else that you know of. Text connector, right? How does it relate? How do you relate to the characters, the events, things that are happening, the surroundings? How can you connect that in some way to your own life? And so you set your page up like this, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And now we're going to read this story, Mike on Strike. And I'm telling you guys, you're going to like this. It says, keep calm and strike on. All right, so here they are. They're sitting in the room, having a nice little conversation. So here we go. Mike McCarthy was a curious guy. So curious that he wanted to buy his friend Derek's super spy kit in order to find out people's secrets. You ever met someone like that? That's always needed to know someone else's business? Yeah. Oh, come on, you have. So that would be your text connection. You would write about that person and tell how it relates to Mike. To buy the kit, though, Mike needed $25 that he didn't have. I get $8 a week allowance, Derek said. And at that rate, you just need 3 allowances, more or less, to pay me. $8, Mike repeated. What do you have to do to get that? Derek sucked the salt from a peanut shell and shook his head. Nothing, he said. But I know how families like yours work, with chores and stuff, he shrugged. How many of your allowances would it take? And then, Mike says, 10, right? So how much does he get?
8.
$25 is what he needs. He said it'll take him 10 allowances to make 25. What times 10 gets you close to 25? $2 and... Yes. He gets $2.50 a week. And his buddy gets 8. Derek shook his head. Negotiate a raise, he said. I tried negotiating last month with Tooth Fairy, Mike said. She is one tough customer. Derek shook his head again. Forget fairies, he said. Parents are softies by comparison. You just need to show them what you bring to the table. Table, Mike asked. All right, so first of all, how many of you have got a friend like this guy right here? Look, how many of you got a friend like this dude right here? Who he's always got money. His parents kind of give him everything. This guy right here, right? He's like, well, whatever. And then this poor kid, Mike, I was more like Mike, right? My parents gave me a little money, but I had to W-O-R-K for it.
I did too.
Okay? So everybody knows a guy like Derek, though, who's like, oh, I can't believe you don't have it, right? So here he is. Here's Mike dreaming up the table, right? The bargaining table, Derek explained, set up for a potluck. Then, think what would happen if nobody brought food. Everyone would go hungry, Mike said. Sure, Derek said. But whoever hosted the next party would hire a caterer instead. No one would have to cook. Just what was Derek driving at? Mike had no idea. Is their food good? Mike asked. Catered food is always better than homemade, Derek said. But that's beside the point. Mike wondered if that could be true. His mom was pretty good cook, and his dad's French toast was a slice of heaven. Derek continued, the potluck, the caterer, the food, that's all just a metaphor. The point is that when you come to the bargaining table, you need to bring something to bargain with. Right? How many of you got a friend who always wants to plant big ideas in your head, right? I do. I've got a friend like Derek. We know someone like Derek. And there's your text connection. Tell about the person you know who's like Derek and how they connect, right? I got nothing, Mike said. Well, hold on. I make good lemonade. Derek groaned in frustration. Forget the food thing. Do you do any chores, he asked. Mike nodded. Derek was the only third grader in their class with his own smartphone. Oh, how many of you know that person? They always got to have the first stuff. He grabbed it. Talk to me, he said. We'll make a list. The chores you do are what leverage is and what you use to bargain. Okay, Mike said. I take out recycling. I make my bed. I clear the dinner table. Derek tapped away on his phone without looking up. He inquired, any seasonal chores? Yeah, Mike said. I rake leaves and shovel snow. I mow the lawn. Derek asked, not yet, Mike said, but I weed the vegetable garden. Pet care, Derek asked. I feed pickles sometimes, Mike said, if my mom tells me to. Derek tapped some more, then looked up. Excellent, he pronounced. So this is what you bring to the table, see? If your parents had to pay someone else to do all that work, it costs them more than what they pay you. This is why they passed child labor laws, to protect kids like you from being exploited. Now, how many of you have got a friend who's a little dramatic like that? Exploited, really? Hands are up, right? So lots of text connecting going on here. I didn't know that, Mike murmured. Sure, Derek said. Your parents are taking advantage of you big time. Oh, Mike said. He felt himself getting depressed. Stay with me here, Derek said, because this is going to change real soon. You've got this list of things you do for them, and now you're going to take it to them, and you're going to make your demands very clear. And if your parents refuse to meet your demands, you're going to go on strike. So what is a strike, you guys? How many of you have ever heard of a strike? What's a strike? Do you tell me real quick?
A strike is whenever someone doesn't like what's happening, or
Yeah. They refuse to go to work. So a strike is a form of protest in which workers refuse to work. And their goal is to enforce or force employers to meet their demands. Right? To meet their demands. Usually they want better working conditions and higher pay for fewer hours. Strikes can be effective if other workers can't or won't step in to do the job. History is full of famous strikes that changed a country and sometimes the world. Railroad, mine, steel, and postal workers have held some of the most famous strikes in modern history. Right? I am, Mike asked. You don't have a choice, Derek said. You don't want to be oppressed, do you? I don't know, Mike said. He didn't know what oppressed meant. He just knew he felt depressed. Now, how many of you have got a friend like Mike who's a little gullible, who goes for anything you tell him? Like, Mike seems a little gullible, right? All right, my reading group, which are, you know who you are. Go ahead. You guys can head down. Okay? I know, but you got to go. It's 1:30. That's going to be Kylie, Bryson, Blake, Carson, Addison, Bo, Elijah, and James. Shh, quietly. So Derek spent the next few days coaching Mike. By the weekend, Mike felt prepped and ready to take on his parents. Parents, he began after Saturday breakfast, we need to talk. Slowly and warily, his parents' faces emerged from behind two sections of newspaper. We're listening, said Mr. McCarthy. I bring a lot of value to this family, Mike said. We agree, his dad said. Wait, Mike said. Don't you want to hear what my value is? We know your value, Mrs. McCarthy said. We love you, honey. Mike thrust his warm feelings aside. The point is, he preserved, you should raise my allowance. He pushed a list of his chores across the table to them. Let's negotiate, he said. I demand $8 a week. Stop right there, Buster, said his mom. Nobody in this family makes demands. Now, how many of you could relate like this? You would say, I can relate to Mike's parents because if I spoke to my parents like this, they would say, right, there's a text connection right there. Hands are up again. Awesome. Nobody's making demands in this family. They do if they're oppressed, Mike said. Mrs. McCarthy snorted. Mr. McCarthy raised a hand to cover his grin. If my demands are not met, Mike said, I'll go on strike. You can do that, his dad said, but you realize that while you're on strike, you won't get paid. Mike swallowed. So it goes, he said, and so it went. So there he is on strike. Now, how many of you guys have disagreed with an allowance or something, a policy or some rule in your parents' house? All of us have. I have parents. I didn't agree with 100%, right? But it doesn't matter. You still gotta follow the rules, right? For the next 2 weeks, Mike did no chores at all. When it was time to clear the dishes off and the table, he cleared out of the room. When it was time to take out the recycling, he took a hike. At first, he was amazed to get away with it. By the 3rd week, though, Mike began to notice something disturbing. He was spending less time with his family and, consequently, missing out on stuff. He heard the clink of silverware when his little sister, Astor, helped his mom load the dishwasher. Okay? He heard... It's Mr. Tadero. Cohen has one they have chargers at home. They were given to. Yeah. Very good. Bye. So, after Astor helped his mom load up the dishwasher, he heard them laughing. What was so funny? Have you ever felt that before, where there were a group of people laughing and you were curious, you felt like you wanted to be a part of it or you felt left out? That's a text connection. See what we're doing here? If he had the spy kit, he would know. Then again, if he were helping with chores, he would know. He wouldn't have to spy. You know, Mike said during the 4th week, I'm ready to start my chores again if you're ready to raise my allowance. His parents looked at each other. Nope, his dad said. We're good. Yeah, nice try, right, Mike? He tried again. The following Saturday, Mike woke up to a special muffled hush. The singular silence of snow. Now that I can connect to. Everyone in here has woken up, looked out their window, and it's just really quiet, and there's tons of snow, and there's no cars. We've all had that experience. We live in Northeast Ohio. That right there is a text connection, right? The world outside his window was transformed into a sparkling wonderland. The driveway and walks were buried. But his dad was already outside clearing the front porch to locate the newspaper. Normally, Mike would rise now and pull on his boots and help. Instead, he watched his mom and Astor emerge in hats and mittens. Astor was wielding Mike's shovel. All of them were working and laughing together and laughing again. Why were they laughing this time? Mike walked downstairs. He put on his boots and scarf, his hat and coat, his gloves. He walked outside and gently took the shovel from his sister. He worked on the sidewalk for a solid 20 minutes before anybody said a word to him. Returning to the house, though, his dad patted his shoulder. Welcome back, buddy, he said. Mike didn't get a raise that particular Saturday. He did, however, get a heavenly French toast breakfast and all the laughs that no allowance could ever buy. All right, so we read this story, Mike on Strike. By a show of hands, how many of you heard or saw or could relate to something specific? And it's open in that story, right? All of you. So what I want you to do is go to your seats right now and do a little text connecting and see how you relate and connect this